The cowboy said, "Look, it's swelling." Then he lifted the Apache woman's dress in shock. The sun was already high when the day began, burning the open land with a dry, steady heat. Dust rose with every step of the horse, hanging in the air like a thin curtain. The cowboy rode at an easy pace, used to this land and its silence. Beside him rode the Apache woman, straight-backed and quiet, her eyes fixed on the long stretch ahead. They had worked together that morning, loading supplies meant for families living farther out, where roads did not reach and help came slowly, if at all. She was not new to hard work. Everyone could see that in the way she moved and spoke. She carried herself with calm strength, never wasting words, never asking for more than what was needed. The cowboy respected that. He had met many people over the years, but few carried themselves with such steady pride. She had insisted on making the ride back on her own horse, even after slipping on rocky ground earlier that day. He remembered the fall clearly. It had happened fast. One moment she was walking ahead, guiding a small group across uneven land, and the next she slipped, hitting the ground with a dull sound. He had rushed toward her, asking if she was hurt. She stood up almost immediately, brushing dirt from her dress, her face calm. "I'm fine," she had said simply. He had learned that people often said that even when they were not. Still, she showed no sign of pain then. No limp, no complaint. So he let it go, though something about the way she avoided his eyes stayed with him. Now, hours later, the ride back felt longer than usual. The heat pressed down, and the wind offered little relief. The cowboy noticed that she had grown unusually quiet. She normally spoke when needed, asking short questions or pointing out landmarks. But now she rode in silence, her hands gripping the reins a little tighter than before. He glanced over at her more than once. At first he told himself he was imagining things. People got tired. Long days did that. But then he saw her shift in the saddle just slightly, as if trying to find a position that didn't hurt. Her breathing was controlled but not relaxed. "You holding up?" he asked, keeping his voice casual. She nodded without looking at him. "Yes." It was the same answer as before. Short, firm, final. They rode on. The land stretched wide and open, broken only by low hills and scattered brush. The silence grew heavy. The cowboy had spent most of his life reading small signs, how animals moved, how weather changed, how trouble announced itself before it arrived. Those instincts stirred now. He noticed her left leg press harder against the horse's side. He noticed the slight stiffness when she shifted her weight. Once, when the horse stumbled over a rock, she inhaled sharply before regaining control of her breath. That was when he knew something was wrong. They reached a narrow patch of shade near a line of trees, and he slowed his horse. "We'll rest here," he said. "Just a few minutes." She hesitated, then nodded. When she dismounted, she did so carefully, too carefully. Her boot touched the ground, and for a moment she didn't put her full weight down. The cowboy pretended not to stare, but his concern deepened. They tied the horses and sat on fallen logs. The air smelled of dry leaves and warm earth. Sweat traced slow lines down his neck. He watched her from the corner of his eye. She sat straight, hands folded, eyes lowered. "You sure you didn't hurt yourself earlier?" he asked again, more gently this time. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Pain passes." He didn't argue. He had heard that belief before, but pain didn't always pass on its own. Sometimes it stayed quiet until it turned dangerous. As they sat, he noticed something else. Her foot began to tap lightly against the dirt, not in impatience but in discomfort. Her jaw tightened. She pressed her lips together as if holding something back. "You're shaking," he said. She looked down at her leg, then back up at him. "It's nothing," she replied, but her voice was softer now. The cowboy leaned forward slightly. "Nothing doesn't usually do that." She didn't answer. The wind moved through the trees, stirring the leaves above them. Time stretched. Finally, she spoke. "I don't want to stop," she said. "People are waiting." "So am I," he replied. "Waiting to make sure you get back in one piece." She studied his face as if deciding whether to trust him. Trust did not come easily to her. History had taught her to endure quietly, to rely on herself, to keep pain private. "I fell wrong," she admitted at last. "That's all." "Where?" he asked. She hesitated, then touched her leg just above the knee. The movement was small, but his eyes followed it. That was when he noticed the fabric of her dress pulled tighter there than before. Not by much, but enough. He frowned. "That wasn't like that earlier." She looked away. "It will settle." He stood slowly, careful not to startle her. "Mind if I take a look?" he asked, "just to be sure." She stiffened at once. "No," the answer came fast, too fast. He raised his hand slightly, showing he meant no harm. "I'm not trying to disrespect you," he said. "I just don't like guessing when someone's health is on the line." Her shoulders rose and fell with a controlled breath. She looked tired now, more tired than she should have been. "In my family," she said quietly, "we don't make trouble from pain." He nodded. "I get that. But sometimes pain makes trouble whether we invite it or not." She was silent again. The sound of insects filled the space between them. Then, without warning, her leg trembled sharply. She grabbed the edge of the log to steady herself. Her face remained calm, but her hand shook. "That's not nothing," he said firmly. She closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, something had changed, not fear but acceptance. "It started swelling," she admitted, "after the fall." "How fast?" he asked. "Faster than it should," she said. That answer sent a cold feeling through him. Fast swelling was never a good sign. He thought of all the things that could cause it. Hidden injuries, reactions, things that didn't announce themselves until it was almost too late. He crouched down near her, keeping his distance. "If it keeps swelling, it could get serious," he said. "We need to know what we're dealing with." She looked down at her leg again. This time she didn't pull away. "Just for a moment," he said. "That's all I'm asking." She gave a small nod. The cowboy didn't touch her. He only watched as she slowly shifted, revealing enough for him to see the clear outline beneath the fabric. The shape was wrong. The swelling was real, and it was spreading. His stomach tightened. "This isn't something to ignore," he said quietly. She exhaled, a long breath she seemed to have been holding all day. "I know." The weight of that moment settled over them both. The long ride, the heat, the silence, it all led here. What had seemed like a simple day had changed without warning. Far away, the land stretched on, uncaring and vast. Help was still a distance away. And now, the cowboy understood that this ride was no longer just about getting home. It was about time and choices, and what happened when strength met reality. He straightened slowly, his mind already working through what came next. Whatever this was, they couldn't afford delay. And the worst part was clear to him now. This was only the beginning. The cowboy did not waste time after seeing the swelling. He stood there for a moment, eyes fixed on her leg, his thoughts moving fast. He had seen injuries before. Broken bones, twisted joints, hidden wounds that looked small at first but turned dangerous later. This felt like one of those moments where delay could cost more than comfort. "We need to move," he said calmly, "but not before we understand what's happening." She looked at him, her face steady but pale from the heat. "I can ride," she said. "I've ridden worse days." "I believe you," he replied, "but belief won't stop swelling." She almost smiled at that, a faint curve at the corner of her mouth, then quickly looked away. The ground beneath them seemed to tilt slightly as she shifted. She caught herself again, and this time she did not hide it. The cowboy fetched his canteen and handed it to her. "Drink," he said. She took a few slow sips. The water helped, but not enough. He could see it in her eyes. She was focusing hard, the way people did when they refused to let pain show. "Tell me everything," he said. "From the fall until now," she nodded. "When I fell, I felt a sharp sting," she said. "Not like hitting a rock, like something quick. I thought it was nothing." "Did you see anything?" he asked. "No," she replied. "I stood up fast. I didn't want to slow anyone down." That made sense to him. She had spent her life making sure she was never the reason others waited. Strength to her meant endurance. "When did the swelling start?" he asked. "Not long after," she said. "At first it was small, then it spread." The cowboy looked toward the trees, scanning the ground. He knew this land well. He knew what lived here, what hid under rocks and brush, what left marks that people ignored until it was too late. He came back and knelt near her again, careful to keep his movements respectful and slow. "I need to see a bit more," he said, "only to understand." She hesitated, then nodded once. This time she lifted the fabric herself just enough for him to see clearly. The swelling was worse than before. The skin around it looked tight, stretched, and warmer than it should have been. There was a small mark near the center, easy to miss if you weren't looking. His breath caught. "That mark," he said. "You didn't feel it." "I did," she said, "but I didn't know what it was." He swallowed. "It could be a reaction," he said carefully, "or something else." She studied his face. "Something dangerous," she said. "Yes," he admitted. They sat in silence for a moment. The wind moved softly through the trees. Somewhere a bird called out. The world continued as if nothing had changed, but for them everything had. "What do we do?" she asked. "We keep you calm," he said. "We don't rush blindly, and we get help as fast as we can." She nodded again. "I don't want to faint," she said quietly. "You won't," he said. "I'm here." He wrapped a clean cloth loosely around the area, careful not to tighten it. "This isn't to fix it," he explained, "just to protect it while we move." She watched him work. "You've done this before," she said. "Enough times to know when to worry," he replied. They mounted their horses again, but this time the ride felt different. He stayed close, matching her pace, watching her posture, her breathing, the way her hands moved. He spoke to her often, asking small questions, keeping her alert. "How's the pain now?" he asked. "It's steady," she said, "not sharp." "Tell me if that changes," he said. "No waiting," she agreed. The road ahead felt longer than before. Every sound seemed louder, every movement mattered. After a while her voice grew quieter, not weaker, just slower. He noticed the way her shoulders slumped slightly, the way her eyes blinked more often. "Stay with me," he said gently. "Talk to me." She took a breath. "When I was young," she began, "my grandmother told me that pain is like a storm. If you show fear, it stays longer." He listened. She was wise, he said, but even storms need shelter. She considered that. "Not everyone believes that," she said. "No," he agreed, "but I do." The swelling continued. He could see it even from the saddle. It made his jaw tighten. He urged the horses on, but not too fast. Balance mattered now more than speed. At one point her horse stumbled slightly. She grabbed the saddle horn, steadying herself. He reached out without thinking, placing a hand near her arm, not touching, just close enough to offer support. "I've got you," he said. She nodded, her lips pressed thin. Minutes passed, then more. The sun dipped slightly, though the heat did not fade. He could tell she was fighting something deeper now, not just pain, but the pull of exhaustion. "Look at me," he said. She turned her head. "Count with me," he said. "Slow." They counted together, breaths matching the rhythm of the horse's steps. It helped. He saw her focus return, her spine straighten a little. "You're doing good," he said. "So are you," she replied softly. When they reached a rise in the land, he could finally see the distant structure where help waited. It was still far, but visible. Relief mixed with urgency. "We're close," he said. "Just a bit more." She nodded, but her voice wavered when she spoke again. "If I slow you down, stop," he said firmly. "You are not a burden." She looked at him, surprised. "Being strong doesn't mean being alone," he continued. "It means knowing when to let someone ride with you." Her eyes softened. She said nothing, but something shifted between them, a quiet understanding. The swelling reached a point where she could no longer ignore it. Her leg shook again, stronger this time. She gasped, then quickly regained control. "That's new," she admitted. "That means we hurry," he said. He guided her horse closer to his, keeping their path steady. He spoke constantly now, grounding her with his voice, reminding her to stay awake, to stay present. Finally, they reached the place they had been aiming for. As they dismounted, others rushed forward, seeing the concern on his face, the careful way he supported her without lifting her. "She needs help now," he said clearly. They moved her into shade onto a safe place to rest. As hands took over, trained and calm, he stepped back, though his eyes never left her. She looked up at him once more. "You didn't look away," she said. He shook his head. "No," he replied, "and I won't." As the situation passed into capable hands, the weight of the day settled in his chest. The ride that had begun like any other had turned into something else entirely. Something that tested patience, trust, and the thin line between endurance and danger. And though part two of their journey was ending, he knew the next moments would matter even more. The place where they stopped was quiet but busy in its own way. People moved with purpose, speaking in low voices. Shade had been set up, and water was brought quickly. The cowboy stepped aside as others took over, but he stayed close enough to see her face. She was resting now, lying back with support beneath her shoulders. Her eyes were open but heavy. A woman with calm hands checked the swelling carefully. She spoke softly, explaining each step before she did anything. The Apache woman listened, nodding when needed. Even now, she did not complain. She answered questions clearly, even when her voice sounded tired. The cowboy watched all of it. He felt the familiar pull of worry, mixed with something else he couldn't name. It wasn't fear exactly. It was the weight of knowing how close things had come to going wrong. "She's stable," the woman said at last, "but we need to keep watching her." The cowboy let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. He moved closer, stopping where she could see him without having to lift her head. "You did good," he said quietly. She looked at him, her eyes steady. "So did you." They shared a brief moment of silence. Around them, the land stretched wide, the same land that had carried both of them for most of the day. It felt different now, less distant, more aware. As time passed, the swelling began to slow. Not gone, but no longer spreading as fast. That was a good sign, they were told. Still, she needed rest. Real rest. Not the kind where the body keeps moving while the mind refuses to stop. The cowboy stayed nearby. He brought water when asked, stepped back when needed, and spoke only when it helped. He didn't rush her with questions. He had learned long ago that some stories came out only when they were ready. Later, when the sun dipped lower and the heat softened, she spoke again. "You kept asking me to talk," she said. "Most people don't." He shrugged slightly. "Silence can be dangerous," he said. "Especially when someone's hurting." She considered that. "In my family," she said slowly, "silence was safety." He nodded. "I understand that more than you might think." She turned her head slightly to face him. "Tell me." He paused. Talking about himself didn't come easily. But the day had already stripped away many walls. "Where I grew up," he said, "you didn't show weakness, you worked. You endured. You learned to stand even when you should have sat down." She listened closely. "It took me years," he continued, "to learn that asking for help wasn't the same as failing." She looked thoughtful. "I was taught that needing help meant giving up control." "Sometimes it does," he said gently, "but sometimes it saves your life." She closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them again. "Today," she said, "I almost chose control over life." He didn't argue. "And today," he replied, "you chose both." The hours passed slowly. As evening settled in, the sounds of the land changed. The woman's breathing evened out. Her color returned little by little. The tension eased, though it didn't disappear entirely. At one point, she asked him to sit closer. "Stay where I can see you," she said. "It helps." He did. He sat on a nearby crate, resting his elbows on his knees. "I'm not going anywhere," she smiled faintly. "You say that like a promise." "It is," he said. She grew quiet again. This time, it wasn't from pain. It was the kind of quiet that came when a person felt safe enough to think. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. "When I fell today," she said, "I remembered other falls, times when no one stopped." He listened. "I learned early to get back up fast," she continued. "If you stay down too long, people forget you were ever standing." "That shouldn't be true," he said. "But it is," she replied. Or it was. He thought about that, about how many people he had seen push through pain because they believed stopping meant disappearing. "You didn't disappear today," he said. "No," she agreed, "because you saw me." The words settled between them heavier than either expected. As night approached, the woman who had been checking her returned. "She'll need to rest here tonight," she said. "We'll keep watch." The Apache woman nodded. "Thank you," she said. The cowboy stood. "I'll stay nearby," he told them. "If that's all right." It was. Later, when the stars began to appear, she spoke again. "You could have left," she said, "after bringing me here." "I could have," he admitted. "But you didn't," she said. "No," he said simply. She turned her gaze upward, watching the sky. "Where I come from," she said, "help always comes with a price." He frowned. "Not this time." She studied his face. "Why?" He thought about that. "Because sometimes," he said, "doing the right thing is the only price worth paying." She smiled, a real smile this time. "You're different than I expected." "So are you," he replied. They fell into a comfortable silence. Not the kind built on fear or habit, but the kind built on understanding. The kind that allowed breathing room. As the night deepened, her strength continued to return. She asked for water again. She shifted without wincing. Small signs, but important ones. "You scared me today," she said suddenly. He looked at her. "You scared me too." She raised an eyebrow slightly. "I don't like watching strong people hurt in ways they can't fight alone," he explained. She nodded slowly. "I don't like needing help," she said. "But today taught me something." "What's that?" he asked. "That letting someone see your weakness doesn't take your strength away," she said. "It shares it," he smiled. "That might be the smartest thing I've heard all day." She laughed quietly, then winced just a little. He noticed immediately. "Still sore?" he asked. "Yes," she admitted, "but manageable." "Good," he said. "Tell me if it changes." "I will," she promised. That promise mattered more than she realized. As he prepared to rest nearby, she reached out and touched his sleeve lightly. "Thank you," she said, "for not treating me like a problem to solve." He met her eyes. "You're not a problem," he said. "You're a person." She released his sleeve and lay back, her eyes closing as sleep finally took hold. The cowboy sat back, looking out at the land under the stars. The day replayed in his mind. The fall, the swelling, the long ride, the moment she finally agreed to stop. He understood now that the real journey hadn't been across miles of land. It had been across trust, history, and the quiet spaces where people learned to let others stand beside them. And he knew that whatever came next, neither of them would face it the same way again. Morning came slowly. The light crept in soft and pale, touching the land without hurry. The cowboy woke before the sun fully rose, as he usually did. Habit pulled him awake, but concern kept him alert. His first thought was of her. He stood and walked quietly toward where she rested. The night watch nodded to him. "She slept," the woman said. "That's a good sign." Relief moved through him like a deep breath. He stepped closer. The Apache woman was awake now, her eyes open, watching the sky change color. She turned her head when she sensed him nearby. "You stayed," she said. "I said I would," he replied. She smiled faintly. "You keep your word." He crouched near her, careful not to crowd her space. "How do you feel?" "Tired," she said honestly, "but clearer. The pain isn't spreading." "That's good," he said. "That's very good." She shifted slightly, testing her leg. She moved slowly, listening to her body instead of fighting it. "It still hurts," she said, "but it's not getting louder." He understood what she meant. Pain had a way of shouting when something was wrong. Silence, or at least calm, was progress. Others came to check on her again. They worked carefully, explaining each step. The swelling had stopped growing. It was still there, still serious, but no longer racing ahead. That meant the danger had eased, though it hadn't disappeared. "She needs to be taken to a proper place for continued care," one of them said. "Soon, but not rushed." The cowboy nodded. "I'll help." The Apache woman looked at him. "You don't have to." "I know," he said. "I want to." She studied him for a moment, then nodded. "All right." Preparing for the journey took time. A vehicle was arranged. Supplies were checked twice. They made sure she was comfortable and secure. The cowboy stayed close through all of it, offering help when asked, stepping back when not. As they lifted her carefully, she caught her breath, then steadied herself. He watched her face, ready to speak if she needed grounding. "I'm all right," she said before he could ask. "Just adjusting." They set off slowly. The road was rough in places, smoother in others. The cowboy sat near her, watching the land pass by through the open side. The world looked different from this angle, slower, more thoughtful. She broke the silence after a while. "When I was younger," she said, "I thought strength meant never stopping." He listened. "I thought if I stopped, everything behind me would catch up," she continued. "All the things I didn't want to feel." He nodded. "Stopping gives those things space." "Yes," she said, "that's what scared me." He thought about that. About how many miles he had ridden just to avoid standing still. "You can't outrun everything," he said gently. She looked at him. "No," she agreed. "I see that now." The drive took longer than expected. At one point the road narrowed, forcing them to slow even more. She tensed slightly, her hand gripping the edge of the seat. "Breathe with me," he said quietly. She did, in and out, slow, controlled. The moment passed. "You're good at that," she said. "Practice," he replied. She smiled. "Life gives plenty of chances to practice." When they arrived, the place was clean, calm, and quiet. People met them at the door, ready and prepared. The transition was smooth, but it still felt like another crossing, another step into unfamiliar ground. As they moved her inside, she reached for him again, touching his sleeve like before. "Don't go far," she said. "I won't," he replied. They settled her into a room filled with soft light. She looked smaller there, not because she was weak, but because the space asked her to rest. Truly rest. That kind of rest can feel like surrender when you've never allowed it. The cowboy stayed just outside while they worked. He paced once or twice, then forced himself to sit. Waiting had never been easy for him, but he waited anyway. Time stretched. Minutes felt longer than miles. He watched the clock, then looked away. He thought about the moment he had first noticed her silence on the trail, how close that moment had been to passing unnoticed. He realized something then. Strength wasn't just about endurance. It was also about attention, about seeing what others missed, about speaking when silence felt easier. Finally, someone came out. "She's stable," they said. "She'll recover, but it will take time." The weight he had been carrying loosened at last. "Can I see her?" "Yes," they replied, briefly. He stepped inside. She looked tired but alert. Her eyes met his and relief crossed her face. "You made it," she said. "So did you," he replied. They shared a quiet smile. "They say I need to stay still," she said, a hint of humor in her voice. "I'm not good at that." "I've noticed," he said. She sighed softly. "But I will, this time." "That's all anyone can ask," he said. He stayed only a short while as promised. Before he left, she spoke again. "When I leave here," she said, "things will go back to normal." "Maybe," he said, "or maybe they'll go forward." She considered that. "I like that better." Outside, the day moved on. People passed, lives continued. But something inside him had shifted. He knew he wouldn't forget this. Not the ride, not the choice to stop. Not the way two strangers had met in the middle of a hard moment and chosen trust. Later that evening, he returned again. She was resting, eyes closed, breathing steady. He didn't wake her. He just sat nearby, watching, making sure the promise he had made still held. In the quiet, he understood that some journeys didn't end when the danger passed. Some stayed with you, teaching you how to move differently next time, how to look closer, how to listen sooner. And he knew that when she stood again, when she walked back into her life, she wouldn't be the same person who had fallen that day. Neither would he. The days that followed were quieter but not empty. Recovery moved at its own pace, slow and steady, like the land after rain. The Apache woman rested, listened, and learned to let time do its work. The swelling eased little by little. Pain faded from sharp to dull, from loud to manageable. Each small improvement mattered. The cowboy returned often. Sometimes he brought news from outside. Sometimes he brought nothing at all except his presence. He learned when to speak and when to sit quietly. He learned that healing was not just something the body did. It was something the mind had to agree to. One afternoon she was awake when he arrived, sitting up with support. Light filled the room, soft and warm. She looked stronger already, her eyes clearer. "They say I'll walk without trouble," she told him, "but I'll need patience." He smiled. "Patience is a skill," he said. "You'll learn it," she raised an eyebrow. "I don't like skills that force me to slow down." "Neither do I," he replied, "but they teach the most." She laughed quietly, then grew thoughtful. "When I leave here," she said, "I'll go back to my people." He nodded. "They'll be glad to see you." "Yes," she said, "but I'll be different." "How so?" he asked. She considered the question carefully. "I won't pretend pain doesn't exist," she said, "and I won't mistake silence for strength." He felt a quiet pride at her words, though he didn't say so. "That sounds like growth," he said. "It is," she replied, "even when it's uncomfortable." As the days passed, she began to move more. First small shifts, then careful steps. Each time she listened to her body instead of pushing past it. He watched her progress with respect. She didn't rush. She didn't hide. She simply did the work. One evening, as the sky turned orange and gold, she spoke again. "You changed something for me," she said. He shook his head. "You did that yourself." "You helped," she insisted. "You saw me when I was trying not to be seen." He looked out the window for a moment. "I've been on the other side of that," he said. "It doesn't feel good." She studied him. "Then you understand." "Yes," he said, "I do." When the day came for her to leave, it felt heavier than expected. She stood, steady and calm, ready to step back into the world. There was no drama, no speeches, just a quiet sense of completion. The cowboy helped load her things. Outside, the land waited, wide and open as always. She turned to him before climbing into the vehicle. "You don't owe me anything," he said, as if reading her thoughts. "I know," she replied. "This isn't about owing, it's about remembering." He nodded. She paused, then added, "If you're ever near my lands, you won't be a stranger." He smiled. "I'll remember that." They parted simply. No long goodbyes, just understanding. The cowboy watched as she drove away, then turned back to his own path. The work waited. The land waited. Life moved on, but he moved differently now. Weeks later, he rode the same stretch of land where she had fallen. The sun was just as bright, the dust just as thick, but he noticed more. The way shadows shifted, the way small signs told larger stories. He stopped where they had rested under the trees. He dismounted and stood quietly. The place looked ordinary, but he knew better. Strength, he realized, was not about how far you could go alone. It was about knowing when to stop, when to listen, and when to stand with someone else. He mounted his horse and rode on, carrying that lesson with him. Far away, the Apache woman walked among her people again. She moved carefully, confidently, aware of her limits and her power. When others asked how she was, she told the truth, and when she saw someone else grow quiet, she noticed. Their lives continued, separate but changed, and that was enough.